The wedding no one saw coming. Jacob Miller was the kind of man most people never noticed twice. He was neither rich nor poor, neither particularly handsome nor particularly plain. He was just Jacob, a simple rancher with sunburned skin, calloused hands, and a quiet, steady way of living. The Miller Ranch sat on the edge of Willow Creek, a town so small that the church bell was the loudest sound most days. The townsfolk gossiped about everything: what color Mrs. Evans painted her fence, who had been late to Sunday service, even how many pies the baker sold that week. In a place like this, news traveled faster than the creek's current. And so, when Jacob sent for a mail-order bride, the whole town found out by the next morning. "Did you hear?" whispered Mrs. Thompson as she bought flour from the general store. "Jacob Miller's sending for a wife," Mr. Green told his drinking buddies at the saloon. "About time," said the preacher, stroking his beard. "That boy's been alone too long." Jacob didn't mind the whispers. Truth be told, he was lonely. Since his parents had passed away, the ranch had grown unbearably quiet. Some nights, he'd sit by the fire and talk to the dog just to hear another voice. So when he saw an advertisement for a marriage service in the county newspaper, something stirred in him. "Lonely hearts, write to us. We will match you with a kind, hard-working bride who seeks a good man in a good town." Jacob took a deep breath, wrote a letter about his life, his ranch, and the kind of partner he hoped to find. He didn't ask for beauty or wealth, just someone who would share the burdens of the ranch, laugh with him, and maybe give him a reason to look forward to each day. Weeks passed before a letter arrived. "Mr. Jacob Miller, your request has been accepted. A bride has been matched to you. She is known for her strength, her honest heart, and her willingness to start anew. She will arrive on the Friday train." Jacob's hands shook as he read the words. A bride. A real wife. His life was about to change forever. He spent the next days preparing. He scrubbed the porch until it gleamed, washed the windows, even mended the old rocking chair his mother had loved. The house smelled of soap and fresh wood polish for the first time in years. When Friday finally came, the whole town seemed to gather near the train station. Mrs. Green had brought a pie, just in case they wanted to celebrate. The blacksmith leaned against the platform railing, arms folded, curious. Even the children from the schoolhouse had been let out early, their teacher claiming it was an educational trip. Jacob stood there nervously, hat in hand, heart thundering. The train whistle sounded in the distance. Steam hissed. The iron wheels screeched as the train rolled into the station. And then, she appeared. The first thing Jacob saw was her shadow stretching long across the platform. Then came her boots, huge, laced up to the knee. And then her full figure emerged from the mist. She was tall. No, towering. 7.5 feet if she was an inch. Broad-shouldered, long-limbed, with hair the color of ripened wheat and eyes as blue as a mountain lake. The crowd gasped as one. Mrs. Green nearly dropped her pie. The woman stepped forward with surprising grace, scanning the crowd until her gaze landed on Jacob. "You must be Jacob Miller," she said, her voice warm and low, like a cello. Jacob swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled. "I'm Freya." The preacher cleared his throat. "Well, no sense standing here. We may as well get to the vows." And so, right there on the platform, Jacob and Freya were married. It was the fastest wedding Willow Creek had ever seen. Some of the townsfolk clapped politely, others just stared. As the newlyweds headed toward the ranch, whispers followed them like a trail of smoke. "She's taller than the church steeple. Poor Jacob, he'll get crushed if she hugs him too tight. She looks like she could lift a wagon with one hand." Jacob heard every word, but he didn't look back. When they reached the ranch, Jacob offered Freya the chair on the porch. She sat down carefully, folding her long legs beneath her. "Do I frighten you?" she asked gently, breaking the silence. Jacob hesitated. "No. I didn't expect a wife my size." He nodded awkwardly. Freya laughed softly. "I know. Most men run the other way. My father used to joke that I'd have to marry a giant from the mountains. But when I read your letter, I thought, maybe a man this honest might not care about height." Jacob looked at her for a long moment. Her face wasn't just striking, it was kind. There was something in her expression that made his chest ache, something that told him she had felt out of place most of her life. "I don't care," Jacob said finally. "You came all this way. That means something to me." Freya's smile lit up the whole porch. That night, as the crickets sang and the moon rose high, Jacob lay awake in bed, listening to the sound of Freya moving quietly in the next room. He wondered what the future would hold. Would the town ever accept her? Would he and Freya learn to love each other, or were they too different? Jacob didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain: his life was no longer quiet, no longer empty. And neither was the town's gossip mill. By morning, everyone in Willow Creek was talking about Jacob Miller's giant bride, and none of them had any idea what she would do next. The day the town fell silent. Life after the wedding was not simple. Freya rose before dawn every morning, her towering frame silhouetted against the first light as she carried buckets of water from the well. She fixed broken fences, chopped enough firewood for the whole winter, and even helped Jacob herd cattle. Jacob had never seen anyone work like her. She could lift a hay bale that usually took 2 men, and she did it without complaint. But life in Willow Creek was more than just work, it was whispers. At church, the townsfolk stared as Freya ducked her head to fit through the doorway. The women whispered behind their hymn books, and the children giggled until their mothers hushed them. "She's so big she could crush that pew if she sat too hard. Poor Jacob looks like a child next to her. Mark my words, this won't last." Jacob pretended not to hear. But Freya heard. She heard it all. One night, as they sat by the fire, she asked softly, "Jacob, do they hate me?" "No," Jacob said quickly. "They just don't understand you yet." "Yet." "They will," Jacob promised. "You'll see." But even Jacob wasn't sure how. The storm. A week later, a storm blew in from the north. Dark clouds rolled over the town, and rain poured down in sheets. The wind howled like a living thing. By noon, Willow Creek was in trouble. The river swelled, spilling over its banks. The small wooden bridge that connected the town to the supply route collapsed under the rushing water. And there, in the middle of the flooded road, was a wagon loaded with food and medicine that the town desperately needed. Jacob and a few men tried to reach it, but the current was too strong. The wheels were stuck deep in the mud. "We'll lose everything," shouted Mr. Thompson, the blacksmith. "We'll lose more than that if we try to cross," warned the preacher. "The current will sweep us away." Then Freya stepped forward. "Hold my cloak," she said simply. Everyone froze as she waded into the water. The current tugged at her skirts, but she stood steady, her long legs like tree trunks planted in the riverbed. Jacob's heart pounded as he watched her grip the wagon with both hands. The horses whinnied in fear, but she soothed them with her voice, calm and firm. "Easy now. We're going home." With a strength none of them had ever seen, Freya pushed the wagon, one step at a time, until it rolled out of the water and onto dry ground. The townsfolk stood in stunned silence. She saved it," Mr. Thompson whispered. "She saved all of us," said Mrs. Green, clutching her shawl. Freya just wiped the rain from her face and smiled at Jacob. "Guess dinner won't be late tonight," she said. For the first time since she'd arrived, the whole town laughed. The trouble at the general store. But Freya's test was not over. A few days after the storm, trouble came to Willow Creek in the form of 3 outlaws. They rode into town just before sunset, dusty and mean, looking for easy money. They stormed into the general store, demanding cash from Mr. Green. Jacob was there buying supplies. "Just hand over the money, old man, and no one gets hurt," growled the leader, a scar-faced brute with a pistol. Jacob's fists clenched. He stepped forward. "Leave him be. You want trouble, you'll have to go through me." The outlaw laughed. You're barely a fight. Move aside." Before Jacob could reply, the door banged open so hard it hit the wall. Freya filled the doorway, her shadow stretching across the floor. "Put the gun down," she said, her voice cold as winter. The outlaws stared at her like they'd just seen a ghost. "Lady, this ain't your business." It was the last thing the man said before Freya crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed him by the collar, and lifted him clean off the floor. "Did you threaten my husband?" she asked. The man's face turned pale. I was just..." She carried him outside like he weighed no more than a sack of flour and set him down in the mud. "Get out," she said, "and tell your friends that Willow Creek doesn't welcome bullies." The other two outlaws didn't wait for a second invitation. They mounted their horses and rode off, leaving their leader scrambling after them. The townsfolk had gathered by now, watching the scene with wide eyes. Mr. Green stepped forward, tipping his hat. "Ma'am, I reckon you just saved our town." "Again," someone added. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the townsfolk cheered. Acceptance. From that day forward, Freya was no longer just Jacob's giant wife. She was the woman who had saved their supplies, protected their store, and faced down armed men without fear. Children waved when she walked by. Women came to the ranch to ask her advice on fixing fences or lifting barrels. The blacksmith even made her a special set of tools sized to her hands. And Jacob was happier than he had ever been. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, he turned to her and said, "You know, I think they finally see you the way I do." Freya smiled. "And how's that?" "As the strongest, bravest woman I've ever met." She blushed, which was no small feat for someone as tall as her. "You know," she said softly, "when I came here, I thought I'd be too much for you, too much for this whole town." Jacob took her hand. "You were exactly what we needed." And just like that, Willow Creek had its new legend, the story of the giant woman who married a quiet rancher and changed their town forever.